Litigation support services. People like to sue. We don't have any attorneys here, I don't think, but, oh, excuse me, Alice. You know, I've known Alice such a long time that I look at her not as an attorney, but as a real person, you know? But the litigation support services gets complex, you know, someone gets hurt, someone gets wronged, somebody's suing something, and we tend to be on the defense side of things, you know, we haven't been on the plaintiff side, though sometimes it's very tempting to get on the plaintiff side. And the OSHA negotiation and fine reduction, if you do get cited, if you get involved with trying to negotiate some sort of settlement, we've been heavily involved in trying to at least be as fair as you can. We don't guarantee, as one OSHA inspector told me, who I used to work with many, many years ago, he goes, Bruce, remember, there's no alumni discounts here, okay? So these are who Emilcot is. We have about 30 people, and we're located about 3 miles away from here, and we've been in TAB, I guess I've been in TAB for about 8 or 9 years now, so it's, you know, it's been a good group, so I'm pleased to be here today. All right, who is OSHA? Stands for, it's an acronym, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, and the overall responsibility is worker safety and health protection. Started in 1970. This is a federal law, and it happened to be, anybody know the president that was there in 1970? This is since the political season? These are trick questions, you know. You realize when you give a presentation like this, you like to throw up some softballs here. So yes, without showing Richard here, but if you remember Richard Nixon, a Republican, you know, talking about smaller government, under his watch, he had OSHA come on board. He also had the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency. So in the 70s, this came about. How the OSHA regulations basically work is there's a mandate. You want to work, you know, to try to have protect the workers in the workplace. But how do you do that? So as part of the whole process in the 70s is to get an agency, get an enforcement agencies, get cops out there that go make sure people do what they're supposed to do. And you also had to put together a bunch of regulations. And they were pulled together back in the early 70s from a whole bunch of different things. And these are rules, very much like traffic rules, that you have to follow if indeed you're going to be an employer with workers anywhere in the workplace. And it doesn't necessarily, it's not limited to what you think would be classic high hazard industries. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. Why is it important to you? Well, the practices and procedures OSHA establishes, and there's enforcement. And in this country, it's known as first instance violation. And it's very interesting when I start talking about different philosophies when we do international work on how do various governments work, how do things like this occur. When you talk about first instance violation, you're not given any warning. You're not told what to do. It's called voluntary compliance. Now, in the world of voluntary compliance, if you're an employer, it's totally up to you, and it's your responsibility to know what you're supposed to do. And if an OSHA inspector comes in, they're not going to sit there and say, gee, it's pretty obvious you never read the book and you didn't know what you're doing. So before I start to enforce anything, let's sit down and let me get my PowerPoint slide out and let me tell you what you have to do. Let me let you do it, and then I'll come back in 2 weeks. That's not the way it works. Very much like the IRS. If you turn around and say, gee, nobody sent me a bill that I had to pay taxes, okay? I didn't know I had to pay taxes. Well, first instance violation, you're going to get fined, and you potentially can go to jail. And the same thing happens with OSHA, the same thing happens with the EPA. So the whole voluntary compliance requires you to be informed, and that's part of the nature of a talk like this. You do have quite a bit of incidences out there. You are seeing improvement when it comes to fatalities, and you're starting to see improvement when it comes to injuries, but when you start dealing with 4 million non-fatal workplace injuries, that's still quite a bit of accidents and injuries, with the hope and the theory that if you do the right thing, if you're moving in the right direction, those injuries, those number of injuries can drop, and the goal is to drop them to zero. Who's covered by OSHA? Well, this slide right here basically talks about private sector employers, okay? That basically is everybody in here that I heard. There are some exceptions, but you'll find that the only exceptions, if you're self-employed, one person, okay, that's an exception. If you're in a farm, in family farm, that's an exception. And if you are domestic household workers, that's an exception. All right, very limited exceptions. So the bottom line is, everybody here is covered under OSHA. So you may get involved. Yes, Wendy?
When you say domestic household workers, so like caregivers, house cleaners, I mean, is that what you're talking about?
My understanding, it's anybody working in an individual residence, and they can be caregivers, cleaning, cooking, things like that.
Okay.
All right. So why worry about OSHA? Well, the whole aspect of OSHA is it's punitive. We're talking about OSHA. OSHA is an enforcement agency. They write violations, okay? And the OSHA violations can handle a number of different things, and or get involved with a whole bunch of different things. One of the things that, from my experience with a lot of companies, is the perceived reflection of who you are if you have OSHA experience. Now, I can get on the line, I can go on the internet with the OSHA.gov and call up any employer and find out what their history is with OSHA, how many citations they've had, when the inspections have occurred. So it can be perceived as a reflection of your quality of work. It clearly can impact.
Is that something anybody can access?
Yes, yes. And afterwards, if we want to go online, I can show you how you can look at other people's records, and it's very valuable, actually. You know, we deal a lot with contractors that have to hire subcontractors, and I say before you get involved, or you deal even more often with owners that have to hire contractors and subcontractors, and in about 90 seconds, you can type their name in and see what their OSHA experience has been. And that can be something, at least give a little insight into the company. It's also a credibility test, because you sit there and you say, well, have you ever had an OSHA issue? You know, as you're staring at the violations. And you know, and as I talk to a lot of contractors, they say, well, you know, we do promote to tell the truth, especially in this day and age of information and internet access and things like this.
And how far back in time do they go?
They go back until when OSHA started, which it's probably rough beyond the mid-'80s. You know, a lot of the database issues going, but we can go back. OSHA went back into the 70s, but usually I don't see much more before 85. So, and it doesn't go away. So it can, and it impacts also your ability to defend yourself as you go forward. So if you have a series of violations, which I suspect most of you, has anybody had any experience with OSHA here? I should have asked that question. Okay. It can cost you a lot of money. We'll talk about something, and it is bad public relations. The OSHA information department, they do publish press releases. Typically, the fines have to be $15,000 or $20,000, or have some, you know, they look at it as a serious violation. But these press releases go out, and there's always a series of press releases. And the goal of OSHA realized they're undermanned when it comes to inspections, or inspectors, I should say. And they don't have enough inspectors. In New Jersey, for example, there may be 40 inspectors out there. And if you look at 40 inspectors, you know, that's not enough inspectors to touch everybody every couple of years. So they want to make a splash in an industry. So they like to go in. And so if you have an OSHA inspection, you have to take it very seriously, because they're looking at not just doing their job on that inspection, but also making a point. You know, so if it's one warehouse area and you find out that person has gotten, that company has gotten in trouble because of, you know, either fall protection or how they handle materials or lift trucks or everything else, the thinking is that if they see citations occur in that area, it motivates other companies to start paying attention.